Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to All Things Division 3 Soccer with Simple Coach and Jackie. Yeah, I am Simple Coach, and Jackie is actually darting around right next to me. She's up and awake, so I'll let her wander and burn off some of that energy. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Really do appreciate it. I figured I would do an episode of Around D3 since I haven't done one in a while, and just to give an impression of some things that have popped into my head, largely as a result of a long-time supporter of the channel who sent me a email or query around my top 25s, and that started off this really big process of taking a look at the rankings and whatnot. And I sort of dawned on me with a lot of different things going on that, maybe it's a good time to do this. So I will address that as well. But in the meantime, I just figured I would give sort of like a state of Division 3 soccer and where I'm seeing it. And hopefully, helps you see or understand what's going on, or at least what's going on in my kind of strange place, a dangerous neighborhood to be in, which is in my mind. So let me start. So this is being recorded on 10/10 at 12:30. So on 10/10, it's Thursday. Yesterday there was a boatload of games that were really, really interesting games to watch. Some surprises, some not so surprises. I think the biggest surprise for me yesterday was the Kenyon versus Ohio Wesleyan game, where surprisingly Ohio Wesleyan defeated Kenyon 3-0. That's 3, as in 1, 2, 3. Not something I expected on the one hand for Kenyon to concede 3 like that. And then on the other hand, I didn't expect Ohio Wesleyan to be able to do that. Ohio Wesleyan, as of late, has sort of had its peaks and valleys and hasn't been a model of consistency. And so I was, again, sort of surprised to see that happen, especially at this juncture. I would have thought we would have gotten into sort of a rhythm of a cadence in these top teams, top 50 teams, that you kind of see already that has happened within the women's game. So that was a big surprise. If you're interested in the women's game and you follow my top 25, but just general Division 3 women's soccer, probably the most telling thing, that's her, by the way. That's not a ghost. You can almost see her popping around. Maybe I'll get if she comes over here. Wash U looks unstoppable. Like really putting its foot down as saying like this is the year. I think they did this a little bit last year as well. They ended up falling to Rochester, if I recall. That sort of broke their win streak. But and let me pull this up. They have 6 games left in their season, all UAA: Brandeis, NYU, Carnegie Mellon, Case, Rochester, and Chicago. That's what's left on there, which is, I mean, those are all top 25 teams for the most part. Chicago is not in my book, but Rochester, Case, Carnegie Mellon, and NYU are definitely there. But leading into those games right now, they've scored 21 goals and only conceded 1. They score on average 4 goals a game. which is, I mean, their closest game has been 2-1 games against Emory and Center. And I just think, man, they are on a roll. Again, they still have to get through some real tough matches, and their tail end is pretty brutal. I mean, legitimately, they could go 0 for 6 in the next. Like, that's how good the competition that they're facing is. But I think it'll be interesting to see. Only 2 are on the road: Rochester and Chicago. Brandeis. 3 are on the road. The other 3, NYU, Carnegie Mellon, and Case, are at home. So I have certain advantages going into these games. I would also say they have a lot of momentum. So another interesting thing in the rankings that I've noticed, or I'm noticing I see, is University of the Redlands. You know, they beat Pomona Pitzer, they beat Whittier, they beat Caltech. I think some of the poll rankings that have come out, the United Soccer Coaches, the NPI, they might have them as top 25 teams. I had them in at one point, and then I dropped them again just because I didn't think they're showing sort of the consistency that I was looking for out of them on a I'll just say week to week basis. But they really sort of turned around to one degree or another. So I'm just looking up here where they would fall. Redlands. There we go. 7-2-2. They lost to Claremont, tied Occidental, which is when I dropped them, and then they go ahead and they beat Pomona. Whittier, which is having a pretty decent year, and then they beat Caltech. So back to the women's side, the other team that kind of looks a little unstoppable, which again, I mean, if you followed, they're very, very good every year, but this year, you can, you can see that they're a program that is always going to be at this level, but it's Christopher Newport. They're really keeping the heat on Wash U. I mean, they've gone on a 10-game winning streak. They tied their first game against Virginia Wesleyan and just came out of the gates. They, in the last last 4 games, they've scored 12 goals and have conceded none. So, including a game against Swarthmore, Wisconsin Eau Claire. They have some interesting games ahead. Mary Washington, at Mary Washington, Roanoke at Roanoke, Washington and Lee, which is having a really interesting season this year, Methodist, and then Salisbury. So real interesting, real fun to watch. Back to the men. My mighty, mighty Purple Raiders took down John Carroll yesterday 2-0, and that surprised me. It's always tough. OAC, like any conference game, is really tough. This is the last time Mount Union and John Carroll will face each other in the OAC, as John Carroll moves to the NCAC. It was most certainly a defensive battle between both teams, but Mount Union carried the day. I still think, it's kind of strange. I always think John Carroll strikes me as a real tournament type team, kind of like I hate to say it, Real Madrid, like they're just built for tournaments and Champions League, it seems to me. And to a certain extent, I always see John Carroll that way. Something changes in them when when tournament time rolls around. So I still think they have legs on this. All right. So looking on the back to the women, since I'm alternating here, there are, I'm gonna say, 3 teams that I think could be, maybe 4. I'll just say 4 for all intents. There are 4 teams that could that I think are dark horses to really give somebody like Wash U, who seems unstoppable, to hit the brakes on them during a tournament, like a 1-game setting. And that is Tufts, Carnegie Mellon, and of all, just down here, Ewing, New Jersey, the College of New Jersey. I think the reason College of New Jersey is because they play a pretty gritty type style that Wash U does. And I think it would be a clash, and I think they could surprise somebody like Wash U. Again, projecting out into the tournament. The whole MPI thing, to be honest, the new rankings and how they're going to determine who makes the NCAAs totally dumbfounds me. Like, I don't have the bandwidth to really sort of focus in on what it all means, so I'll just let it be as to what it is. But they, so some of these teams we talk about might not make it. Again, just based on what I'm hearing, but projecting out, if they did, I think, and they cross paths with Wash U, I think these 3 could be those teams, right? Looking, because there's always that one team that seems to barrel through suddenly that nobody really expected. So I think those are 3 that could be. And then a 4th that I mentioned, they are still undefeatable, and they have not been scored on. Loras College, 11-0, and I think I have them ranked in 6th ahead of Tufts, and they can play. Like, again, I think the tournament makes them face teams, different types of teams, so we'll have to see, right, like how that all plays out. But we're getting towards that point where we got to start thinking about, hey, what does the NCAAs look like? Okay, so finally, I just wanted to talk about this. It's really cool. I love being engaged on this stuff, and largely because it keeps me honest. And let me see if I can pull it up. Let me see. Okay, let me see if I could pull this up. Okay, so I posted as I mentioned before, I have a Patreon page, right, where really, I mean, top-notch supporters support some of the work we're doing in Division III, the website and the videos and all this stuff, and just trying to make, I'll just say, the fan engagement in Division III that much better. Or trying to, right? Like, I don't know if I hit it or not. So this is one of a longtime supporter. I've been going back and forth with him since his son was a really stellar goalkeeper at Franklin and Marshall. And this is what he wrote for the latest rankings. Either Johns Hopkins deserves to be 1 or 2 spots above F&M, or F&M should be ranked higher and maybe just below Johns Hopkins, in my opinion. How does F&M winning 2 games drop 3 spots, and Johns Hopkins goes up 2 spots with 2 wins? You mentioned the wins against SWAT and McDaniel, but F&M beat both teams as well and pretty much dominated SWAT much more than Johns Hopkins did. Further, Johns Hopkins lost two teams that F&M tied, Kenyon. The only thing separating the two teams is Johns Hopkins tied to Mary Washington, which was very, very lucky. Just really bad goalkeeping at the very end. Let's see. Anyhow, so I just figured, you know what, that started this whole, hey, I'm going to look at all this stuff. And you know what? I'm going to agree. I have currently on the men's top 25 that I released for yesterday, I have Johns Hopkins at 8th, up 2. And then I have Franklin and Marshall at 16th, down 3 from where they were the previous week. And I'm going to agree. I'm going to say this is part of the explanation for why Franklin and Marshall drops. I think it was with the relative position of where they were and who I thought deserved to either stay or sort of how movements were happening among the other teams, which you can't help but get caught up in that. So, you know, I dropped Connecticut College and Cortland down to 13th and 14th, down 4 and down 2. McAllister, I thought, deserved to stay where they were at 15th. You know, Williams popped up 5 points in my book. So there was some movement in that area, which now I was like, okay, relative to Franklin and Marshall, where do I think they fit? And I think they're better. They look better, at least. His points are all valid. Like, I mean, if you look, and I started to do this because I'm like, well, I'm going to prove him wrong, right? Like, that was my initial reaction. If you look at stat-wise, it's either even or Franklin and Marshall is a little bit ahead. I will say, and this is where my own eyes sort of come into play when I do my rankings, which is good or bad, or some people like it or not. There's plenty of other rankings that do things differently. Yesterday I had Franklin and Marshall, Lebanon Valley on one screen. And actually I think I posted it to Exeter. And then I had Johns Hopkins at Salisbury. And again, to me, the better soccer team is Johns Hopkins. The part of that is the way they play and my preference for how they play. Part of it was where I think Franklin and Marshall tends to be really ineffective. And again, sort of how they do play. So, but having said that, the disparity between Johns Hopkins and then Franklin and Marshall is probably too wide. Like, do I think Johns Hopkins is 8th in comparison to a 16th ranked Franklin and Marshall? Side by side, the answer to that is no. It should be tighter. And so I'm going to own that. Much to probably a lot of people's surprise. I don't try not to make this stuff up willy-nilly, and I try to actually put some thought into how these teams are ranked. And again, sometimes it's how teams move is a condition of how other teams move, and how I see, you know, how do I rank Occidental to Franklin and Marshall? Does Occidental deserve to be in a better spot than Franklin and Marshall? I think so, because I think Occidental is a better team, plays some different competition. So it's hard, right? So I guess my point is that nothing is there. Just because they play in the same conference doesn't necessarily mean that I judge them by that same measure, right? I look at other things. I try to come up. Do I like the way they play? Do I think the way they play could give them an advantage going forward? And to me, the answer to that is yes. But like I said, I think probably the disparity in this case is quite large. So I think I rambled enough for you all today. I figured I would do this just because, again, I sort of started thinking about a lot of different things and scenarios. again, all interesting stuff. Love to be engaged in this stuff, and I'd love to be kept honest. So um, it just, yeah, it just, it just sparks my creative side, and just sort of what I start looking at, sort of the things I do, and can I do better? And so this is a case definitely that warranted. So thank you, and that's why I always say at the end of my videos, email, DM, I will respond one way or another. This is the one way I decided to respond to that latest email. So, oh, lastly, again, I try to look everywhere for games. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't. I have ranked this week for the first time Hope, who is at 8-1-1, and previously I had Calvin ranked, who I dropped I think 2 weeks ago. If you guys want to go back and watch a game that's really, really good in a place where, you know what, in the Midwest, so if you're on the East Coast, not a lot of folks watch, the Hope Calvin game that was played yesterday is a very good game against two very good teams that can play. And love seeing games like that. So that said, I'm going to call it a day and see what happened over in what Jackie turned over. Sort of happening these days. Again, by all means, email me, text me, go check out the Patreon page. Would love to have you as a member. Do appreciate all the support. And I will be back in tune. I think tomorrow we're doing something for the EJ, the Hive opinion on the games that'll be played this weekend and are part of the weekly pool, which I'm terrible at. And then again, I'll probably be compelled to do another one of these at some point before the tournament. So hope you're enjoying the games. Hope you're enjoying the season. Hope your team's doing what you're hoping your team is going to do. And yeah, we will talk soon. Thank you.